Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar by Tenium. My name is Enrique Molina. I'm a partner and executive director at Tenium, the global tennis platform, and I will be your host for the next hour or so. The idea for this session is to have a quality discussion about the impact of the COVID-19 crisis in the tennis industry. And I am honored to have alongside a selected group of speakers that will be sharing their views and insights, and hopefully shed some light regarding the present and future. And I'm going to jump on to Christophe, and he wears multiple hats, but in this case, we're going to ask him specifically about his views as an event organizer. And so the first question to you, Christophe, would be, it's a very direct, and a lot of us, we're asking, will companies survive the short-term impact and this cash crunch?
Yeah, I mean, that's in any industry a question right now, no? Whether people are going to survive this short-term cash crunch. I mean, I think so. At the end of the day, in tennis, you have a broad number of organizers. You have the federations who, especially the bigger ones, have very deep pockets. The smaller ones, they may be more challenged, but they're not necessarily organizing events. And then you have some of the larger sports marketing companies. They should be okay, and they tend to have reasonable balance sheets, or at least capacity to manage those. And maybe the smaller ones, they will suffer, and we may see some movement in the market there. But for sure, when an event gets canceled, one event for many companies is the whole business cycle of a year for them. So that may prove to be challenging.
Yeah, very, very true. And do you think, as a result of this current distress, I mean, will organizers be forced to consolidate a scale, or becomes increasingly required to compete? I mean, what's your view on that?
Yeah, I think there are two drivers. One is operational, and the other is financial. From an operational perspective, just pointing back to something that Stephen was saying, one thing is the limitations that are there, and they will eventually get lifted. But we are facing a crisis which is putting restraints on businesses to invest in sponsorship, to buy hospitality, or fans to pay 60, 70, 80 euros to come see a final of an event, or even more. No, so I think. We need to continue to make sure that we over-deliver. We over-deliver for these people. We create great events so that they can almost not say that they don't want to go. So we're going to have to convince people even more to come. I think, if anything, what happened with this crisis is that accelerated already some existing trends, though. This is not something new. I mean, there's been ample debate in ATP and in different forums about the need to innovate in the sport. So innovation is required from a fan experience, hospitality experiences, to not just build a tennis event, but to build a full experience. No, and for that, companies need capabilities. I think not only is it management capabilities, but it's things like, for example, IT infrastructures. I think most of the companies today, and therefore their events, are very poor on IT infrastructure, and therefore the digital experiences they can create, but also the information they manage. How they look at their customers, the knowledge they have about their customers, how they market to them. So those are things, if you just have one event, it's very difficult to develop that. So I think innovation in general, beyond technology as well, is going to be something that, it requires investment, it's money, and to just apply that to one event will become more and more difficult. So I think from an operational perspective, for sure, consolidation will continue to happen. And as I said, the crisis, if anything, will continue to accelerate this trend, where companies will come together, put skills together, and be able to have critical mass to be able to build in-house skills, in-house departments. And I think what we will see is that rather than just purely project-driven organizations, we'll see more traditional company models managing different projects, being different tournaments then. So I think that's going to be a shift. So yes, for sure, scale will be important to drive innovation, but frankly, in these times, also cost. So if you spread your overhead over more events, for sure your cost will go down. I agree with Stephen. It's not just only about pushing player prize money down. It's optimizing your whole operation, no? And then I think from the financial side, well, for sure as well. Many small companies in any industry right now are suffering for lack of cash and no ability to finance themselves. So the larger the platform you have, the easier it will be to finance yourself or to build up a balance sheet, which can help you ride through a storm like this.
So Feli, in your view, given the tour's cancellation or suspension rather, is this situation, you think, further distancing, the top players like yourself from the younger generations because they are, their main sort of, source of income, prize money, sponsorship are cut?
Yeah, probably, yes. I mean, myself, for example, I feel very lucky that this is happening now when I am playing probably, the last years of my career. I cannot imagine myself, in this situation, being 20 years old and trying to become a professional player, and I think Christoph or Stephen, they mentioned before that the smaller tournaments are going to suffer this situation probably a little more. And these low-ranked players, they get their income from smaller tournaments like challengers and 250s, and so yeah, they're gonna be struggling probably more, and that's why I think WTA and ATP together they have created this fund in order to help those players, rank the 150 and beyond. This is something very nice, I think, from all of the organizations involved. And yes, of course, they're gonna suffer, this situation a little bit more than the top players. Also, the fact that the calendar is gonna be small, maybe it's gonna be less tournaments, so that situation might be affecting the low-ranked players probably also.
And moving on to sponsorship, more specifically about sponsorship, although we talked, some of it already. The question that I asked Stephen, now a very direct question to you, Martin. Is it, are the companies, not specifically Maui Gym, I hope not, but are the companies going to cut on their sponsorship budgets?
I think the big question, first of all, would be how much longer this is going to take. How long does it take before consumers go out again and spend money and get the economy going? And depending on that, companies can then react. I would like to think that most companies like us will want to continue with sports marketing, will want to continue in tennis. Needless to say that the longer this takes, the harsher that is on the cash flow of anybody. And it might come to a point that you cannot afford everything you'd want to do. So time would tell, but I'd like to be optimistic. If we look around Europe now, lots of economies are, either waking up or starting to go out in the next couple of weeks. It will have done damage, but I don't think to the point where you'd see a lot of sponsors a company drop off. The way in which this will be spent and work will differ, as been alluded to by many people. There is going to be a new normal. So whatever worked a couple months ago might not work in the future. If we look at ourselves, for example, we will want to continue in tennis, but we are very much about interacting with an audience and doing PR and other things on site with the visitors. Yeah, in that respect, if there are events that are being held without an audience, we at the very least have to revisit our activation models to see how we then engage with this new environment, this new event.
That's right, yeah. And so do you think that this will mean a further, assessment of the return of investments? And if so, can this be an advantage for tennis, where investment returns are easier to predict and measure than in other sports?
You're provoking me to say things I probably shouldn't, because I personally, I'm in marketing. I don't really believe in that it's possible to calculate the direct return of investment for most companies involved in tennis, because even we are just a small sponsor, as you know, but we're involved in quite a few tournaments, but we also have Facebook pages and web sites, and we have retail marketing and touch consumers in many ways. So if our sales goes up and down, there's many factors that affect that, and I don't think it's really possible to measure a return on investment of putting your logo on a tennis match or having a boot somewhere, unless you're just looking at the sales of product at an event. That would be different. If you're the hot dog vendor at an event, then yes, you paid for your space, you get your staff and your product, and you get revenue, you get a P&L, and you can calculate an ROI. In our case, it doesn't work like that. So But I think tennis as a platform, and sports marketing as a platform, I don't see why that would become less attractive from an ROI point of view. I don't see any reason.
Great to hear that. Yeah. So about sponsorship, this is a question, about for Christoph and Stephen. What do you think, the events need to change in order to adapt and make our tournaments, more appealing to the sponsors like Maui Gym?
Steve,
Don't jump off here.
Well, it's a difficult question to answer. What I would say though is that the general trends in sports sponsorship I would imagine would remain the same, which is that it's more incumbent on us than ever before to show what a special experience we're providing to a sponsor, both in terms of what we'll be able to deliver to them on site for the people they want to invite along to the tournament and the people they want to entertain, but also how we can work with the sponsor to sort of maximize the return they get more outwardly. So whether that's working with them on initiatives, which we're doing in and around a tournament, whether that's discussing with them like novel ways of us working together. There's all those sorts of elements to sports sponsorship, which I think in the last few years have been prevalent anyway. I mean, it's not an original thing to say that gone are the days where someone just puts their logo on a tennis tournament or a tennis player and then doesn't do anything with it. We all have to work harder. So, I think for us at Queen's, one of the big things that sponsors value is that experience on site. And so, I think we would continue like we have done for many years to work with our sponsors to make sure that we deliver exactly what they want and that we deliver the best possible environment for them to get the return that they want on their investment. Different sponsors come at this from different angles and want different things. But, I would just reiterate the point. Christoph said the same thing as well earlier, that we have to be working harder at this time. But it was a tough sports sponsorship market anyway. And we have been having to work harder for a considerable period of time, and that's just going to get intensified now.
That's right. Yeah. And Christoph, do you think this opens the door, to some new potential sponsors to our sport?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think for sure the sport has been in movement in the last couple of years. And now, as I said before, this will accelerate some trends we've been seeing. I think we can see some new sponsors coming from basically two drivers or two developments. One is, as we've been talking a lot about, creating these new experiences, getting closer to the customer through the use of technologies, by creating more innovative on-site experiences together with sponsors and stuff. I think you're going to bring to tennis potentially some sponsors that are much more experience-oriented. Versus people who are just looking for name awareness. Maui Gym actually is a good example of that. And Martijn certainly pushes all of us pretty hard on creating innovative ideas and ways to interact with the fans and for his brand. But we as a tournament will do that anyway. We saw Red Bull venture a little bit into tennis, I think it was last year. So they're a great example of a very experience-driven brand who seemed attracted by tennis. And I think they're still experimenting with that, but they certainly are interested. So I think that's one thing, people looking more for experience, getting closer to fans, that will continue to attract new brands. And then I think, what this crisis will do, I mean, Martijn talked about it, at some point, some companies will be running into a wall and they will not have the cash to sponsor or they will not want to spend the amounts. But we know from some big events, certain categories have been blocked for a very long time. Some of the big events, they had a car sponsor forever or a bank sponsor forever or an insurance company forever. And maybe the fact that one of these now steps out creates the opportunity for someone new to come in. Someone who's been looking to get into sports or specifically into tennis could take this opportunity and could, together with the tournament, then bring a new wind into the tournament and innovate together. So for sure, I think we are going to see some of that as well. Companies taking the opportunity, maybe some of them that are in a better financial position or are weathering the storm better or have a stronger balance sheet or whatever it may be. These guys, you could see them coming into the sport. And that's certainly something that we would all focus on obviously helping convince some of these companies to come into the sport.
I wish we had more time, of course, another hour, but no, I would like to thank you, and on behalf of Tenium, of course, for your availability and especially for your insights and sharing your views and experience. It's been great having you. I hope the audience also, following us on YouTube enjoy that, this quality discussion.